The following presentation is a production of Ride the Wave Media.
We are those guys. We hope to be your guys, bringing you a hot off the presses edition, Nick. Remember newspapers? Well, that's right. We're here to rapid react to Thursday Night Football. This is coming to you early Friday. So we've got week 8 with the Los Angeles Rams, now 3-5 on the year compared to the Minnesota Vikings, who started 5-0 and have dropped 2 straight. Correct me if I'm wrong. He's Nick Ferguson, correct on all things National Football League. Hey, Nick, what's going on, my man?
Hey, man, just another week of football.
Well, the Vikings run into the Rams, the Lions, and they don't look like the same team we saw for the first 5 weeks. Now, granted, they scored, 2 touchdowns on Thursday Night Football. They almost scored 30 against the Lions, losing on a last-second kick. I know we covered going into that game for week 7, but listen, they were down 8. They end up losing by 10 because there's a controversial safety where Sam Darnold's face mask gets pulled, ultimately deciding this game. But that's just kind of how the cookie crumbles, isn't it?
Unfortunately, that's how the cookie crumbles. But when we look at Thursday Night Football, we've seen bad calls. And this is something that will make a lot of fans upset. And granted, listen, I'm not a Minnesota Vikings fan, but I hate to see a game kind of end in this particular way. It was clearly a face mask. And looking at it from the ref's viewpoint, his view was a little obstructed because he was from behind Sam Darnold when he was sacked. But this was an opportunity or where I think that the league should be able to see an infraction in New York, which they do, by the way, maybe a couple of seconds before we see it on a regular broadcast, where they can buzz down and say, well, there really is a problem. Now, they're probably going to suggest, well, it is not our job to correct the officials on the field if they don't make a call. But we're talking about a call that could have changed the outcome. And I know the score at that time was 28-20, and the Vikings were backed up in their own territory. But as we see, Alex, when we watch these games, we don't know what can happen, but it was really upsetting to see the game end the way that it did.
Well, remember, if I was Bill Belichick, I would tell you, first of all, what a superb job by Ethan Evans pinning the Vikings back to the 3-yard line. Again, his favorite Ram used to be Johnny Hecker, but we'll settle with the new punter in for LA. And that's it, right? You don't let the officials decide the outcome of that game. And it's just unfortunate to see how things kind of end. We focus on the last play of that game and not something that happens earlier on. Is this a trend for the Vikings, knowing that they've lost 2 straight and a really rough injury to their starting left tackle, Christian Darrisaw, who's playing at an all-pro level, protecting Sam Darnold being the top priority?
Yeah, this thing makes things difficult for the Minnesota Vikings. First and foremost, when they were undefeated, one thing that helped keep them afloat, Sam Darnold was playing lights out, something that we didn't anticipate, or at least I didn't.
Right.
But the biggest thing was Brian Flores' defense. They were not giving up a lot of points. They were creating takeaways, and they were setting their offense up on a short field. As of late, over the past couple of weeks, they've done the total opposite of that. And I think it started with that Green Bay game when Jordan Love wasn't expected to play, but he did play. But the Packers ended up scoring, I believe, 24 points and almost taking the game from the Vikings. So that's been a huge problem. So if you're asking questions about what's going on with the Vikings and why they are now losing, it has a lot to do with their defense and how their defense isn't playing the way that they played at the beginning of the season.
Well, you have to give credit to the Rams, right? Who could have thought that their 2 best wide receivers returning, Nick, would have them become this juggernaut of an offense that we saw make the playoffs a year ago? Nearly 400 yards of offense, almost 6 yards per play. They win in time of possession. They win 4 of 10 on third down compared to the Vikings 2 of 7, plus that crucial 4th down conversion to set up the 3rd touchdown to go up 21-14. Now I'm sort of wondering what the limit is for this Rams offense now that it's taken them 7 weeks, but they're only a game below 500 and they've got their full arsenal of players. I mean, we hadn't heard anything about Puka Nacua being activated off of IR and being able to play almost immediately, despite that 21-day window just being open. And now he is dominant, leading the Rams receivers 7 catches, 106 yards. Cooper Kupp, meanwhile, 551 and a touchdown. And of course, Demarcus Robinson, 2 catches, 2 touchdowns.
Well, for me, there's more to the story than meet the eye. The first thing you mentioned, Puka Nacua coming back in that 21-day window. I didn't expect for him to have this type of day, but this shows you what Sean McVay can do with healthy wide receivers. The other thing is, all week long, all we heard was, could Cooper Kupp be on a trading block? And the Rams are taking phone calls and they're asking for a second-round pick.
Right.
I can't help but think that obviously his relationship with Matthew Stafford played a role in what was happening tonight, because there was a key clutch catch that Cooper Kupp made in Cooper Kupp fashion to keep the drive moving and keep the ball away from the Minnesota Vikings. And I'm thinking, once again, wide receiver to quarterback, they're trying to trade me, man. I need you to do something with me to help put me back on the map. So if they want to trade me, my value is going to be up, but I also can stick it to the team at the same time. So I can see both guys saying, you know what, we're going to show Les Snead and Sean McVay that you're not going anywhere.
It's a balanced offense, right? I mentioned all these weapons, including the healthy wide receivers. Kyron Williams continues to be the best player on that offense. I mean, you can give me Cooper Kupp and 3 years ago having the receiving triple crown, and Puka Nacua's first game, going for, 106 receiving yards, but being able to run that football, catching a touchdown as well. Kyron Williams is the reason this offense was able to maintain consistency and to put up 28 points, again, 30 because of the safety, compared to the Vikings, who were trying to run the football. Aaron Jones, meanwhile, one of his lowest rushing totals, yards per carry, certainly, 19 of 58. But here's the Puka Nacua stats for you, Nick, because we were told he was on a limited snap count. That was actually true. 56% of the Rams' offensive snaps, 67% of their pass plays. He was targeted on 41% of the routes that he ran, a career high in a single game for him. This all courtesy of Pro Football Focus. Am I right about Kyron balancing this offense, being the key piece of the offense, or knowing Puka's out there, he's going to get the football?
Well, I mean, Puka is going to get the football regardless of, whatever they were saying that he was on the pitch count. And just think about the numbers he put up for a guy that's on the pitch count. So the way I look at that, it was about efficiency, right? Efficiency leads to effectiveness, which ultimately leads to great performance. Now, Kyron Williams, who luckily I have him on my fantasy team, and I almost did not start him.
What are you talking about, man?
Yeah, because I was like, well, this could be the game that the Vikings defense go back to what they were, but I'm glad that I did. The Vikings defense gave me nothing but maybe 1 point in fantasy, but yet I digress. But having a guy like Kyron Williams who can tote the pill, consecutively carries, and then you can hand it to him inside, or you can give it to him outside, and you can throw it to him. He's going to get you those ground him out yards. That is what you need to take the pressure off of Matthew Stafford, a quarterback, by the way, Alex, who's not that mobile.
And Nick, that win for the Rams was crucial, moving to 3-4. They're in the thick of it in a very heated NFC West. They had the tiebreaker with the head-to-head victory over the 49ers. But 3-4 versus 2-5 kind of keeps their postseason hopes alive, right? 2 wins puts them with the Saints, the Giants, Panthers 1-6. 3 wins now. They're right there in the division, the NFC West, with the Cardinals, the Niners, and of course Seattle leading the NFC West at 4-3. So this is wide open for a team that seems to be ascending based on how they played in prime time. Comparing that to the NFC North, all with winning records, the Vikings falling to 5-2, with the Lions outright taking that division lead.
Well, this is one thing, Alex, I love about the NFL in comparison to some of the other leagues, professional leagues, that is that in the NFL, you have to live on a razor's edge. You have 17 regular season games to make things happen. And I used to think that it was ridiculous to say, well, a team that starts 0-3 or 0-4 barely make the playoffs. but it is true. You look at the situation that you're talking about with the Rams. Yes, sitting at 3-4 is a whole lot better than sitting at 2-5, because at 3-4, logically you try to tell yourself, convince yourself that, you know what, we're almost 500, right? We're almost 500. If we can get to 500, just imagine what we could do after that. But also the ability to have a team be really confident and really push that confidence as a coach. It is so vital when you are 3-4 opposed to being 2-5.
So the rest of the Week 8 slate, Nick, let's stay in the NFC, and we'll go to a couple of AFC teams competing. Listen, I think knowing that we talked about the NFC North, the Chicago Bears are in last place at 4-2, coming off their bye week, playing the Commanders. You've got the number 1 pick, Caleb Williams, against your number 1 pick, Jaden Daniels, even though he went number 2 to Washington. This is a very exciting matchup, clearly not based on draft capital, but they're getting those results early.
Well, they are, and all roads at the current moment, lead to Jaden Daniels not playing in that game, and that was before the season started. The league was looking forward to that. You had 2 top picks playing against one another, so now you're not going to be able to sell it that way, but we still get to see 2 number 1 draft picks go at it. Maybe not the ones that you wanted, but you get Caleb Williams and Marcus Mariota, who, by the way, came in off the bench and saved the bacon for the Commanders. So it's one of those things where you can't just say, well, the Commanders going to be a pushover team because Mariota. No, there's a savvy veteran who's been in this situation before. And I'm sure that he wants to come out and compete and not just really show the Commanders fans, but people around the league and the critics around the league, but that he still can be a starting quarterback in this league.
Well, I think it's fascinating, Nick, because, again, I assumed that when Cliff Kingsbury was fired by the Cardinals, he had a one-way ticket to Thailand, and we never see him again. Is this his offense with 2 successful quarterbacks?
Basically, it is, because I'm glad you brought that up. I almost missed out on it because Cliff Kingsbury was last year, he was at USC with Caleb Williams. So he knows a little about him. And it's wild. Here's what's crazy. Crazy. So you have Jaden Daniels, who's currently now working with Cliff Kingsbury, right? Also, you have Caleb Williams in the league, who also played for Cliff Kingsbury. Then you have Kyler Murray, who's also played for Cliff Kingsbury. And by the way, you have Patrick Mahomes, who also played for Cliff Kingsbury. So we hear about all these other coaches being the quarterback whisperer. Did we get that wrong?
Well, because Texas Tech had a sub 500 record, I know he had that incredible performance against Baker Mayfield in Oklahoma. Patrick Mahomes, Cliff Kingsbury does not get credit for Patrick Mahomes.
Why not? Why?
Because Patrick Mahomes sat for a year in Kansas City. I'd much rather give that credit to Andy Reid and Alex Smith.
Wait. Now, that's not fair, Alex, because how did Patrick Mahomes get there in the first place, right? Why did Kansas City wanted to move up to get it? Because the numbers he put up at Texas Tech under the tutelage of who? Drum roll, please. Cliff Kingsbury.
I mean, as a result of physical traits that like Cliff didn't give him.
Oh,
son of a professional athlete. Like,
it's okay.
I understand there are tools. And clearly, Nick, I'm a tool here for underestimating Cliff Kingsbury. There. All right. I'm not going to give him all the credit in the world, but for what the Commanders are right now, I'm perfectly fine with that. Him turning down that Raiders job turned out to be a great decision by him, unless you wanted to see the best version of Gardner Minshew, I guess. Any other matchups here? Week 8, Nick, that you're particularly interested in?
Well, yeah. Here, Philadelphia at Cincinnati, right? Two highly touted college quarterbacks. Wait a minute. Did Jalen Hurts play for Cliff Kingsbury?
No, you're thinking Lincoln Riley now.
That's right.
Saban in Oklahoma.
Okay. Right.
Alabama, Oklahoma.
Well, they're like the same guy, right? Anyway, they're kind of like.
Now you're giving too much credit to Cliff.
No, but I'm looking forward to this Philadelphia Eagles, Cincinnati Bengals game. The Bengals early on in the season, they looked like they were in the cellar, and we didn't know what was going to happen with Joe Burrow, but more important, Jamar Chase, his contract, what the numbers are going to be. But Jamar Chase continues to prove that he is the number one receiver in this league. And then you look at Philly. We found out what Philly is when they don't have Devontae Smith or they don't have, A.J. Brown. But they performed well last week on the road against division rivals, the New York Giants. And let's just say Saquon got a little bit of revenge. So they're looking to keep that train moving as Eagles fly into Who Dey Nation.
Nick, just like we talked about with the NFC, the AFC, the Bengals are desperate for that win because knowing that they would fall below the likes of the Chargers and hang around the Dolphins who get Tua back, but we'll see how that offense looks. We're not going to lecture anybody about their health. If he wants to go play, he's going to go play. And meanwhile, you've got just some fascinating things with the rest of the AFC, Nick. I don't want to completely focus. You like the ascending Eagles. That puts them with, Washington and Minnesota and Green Bay right there in playoff positioning. But we've got two teams in the AFC with particular interesting storylines, Nick. I'll leave it up to you. This is Nick before we split, right? I'm going to ask you, Nick, our former NFL veteran, before we split, between the 6-0 Kansas City Chiefs that add DeAndre Hopkins from the Tennessee Titans and the Pittsburgh Steelers, who made a change under center with a quarterback you are very familiar with, and they put up a season-high point total. Nick, before we split, the more important addition for this NFL team as they enter Week 8, the Kansas City Chiefs with DeAndre Hopkins and Russell Wilson finally taking over as the Pittsburgh Steelers. You got one in particular?
Yeah, it definitely has to be the Kansas City Chiefs. And the reason why I know when the trade was made for DeAndre Hopkins, it didn't seem like, it was a splash. He's going to change anything for the Chiefs. And he's lost a step. And he's been on multiple teams. I'm going to say this. The guy knows how to run routes. He has a large catch radius. He's still physical even at this tenure in his career. And he has very strong hands. And oh, by the way, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, they don't need Nuke Hopkins to stretch the field vertically. That's why they had Miko Hartman. But more importantly, Xavier Worthy, that's his job. He's the new Tyreek Hill. And then you also have Juju Smith-Schuster, who's still on that roster, even though he's a little banged up. You get those two veteran wide receivers who are now at this stage of their career, they're just possession receivers.
Right.
Basically, they just added another Travis Kelce to the mix. That's all they did. And it just crazy. They keep getting better, even though the offense isn't that great and they're not as explosive as they used to be, and they're winning because of the defense. They just somehow kind of armed up and got another weapon. Another weapon. Come on, NFL. We can't do this.
Yeah, here's my real, Nick, before we split. Do we just ban teams, let alone another AFC team, from trading with Kansas City? Tennessee is going to look at that 5th-round pick. Rand Carthon, your guy, just like, oh, man, the fact that we just made the Chiefs so much better, I don't care. That 5th-round pick is going to pave the way for the future of this franchise. I mean, what are we doing here, Nick?
Well, the idea is that 5th-round pick has an opportunity to move to a 4th-round pick. And when you ran Carthon, you say, look, Will Levis is not working out. Mason Rudolph is not working out. We got rid of Derrick Henry, right? And look what he's doing with the Baltimore Ravens.
A.J. Brown with the Eagles.
Exactly. So what they have to do, they have to somehow put their face back on and say, you know what? We're going to put Nuke Hopkins in a situation where we don't really have to compete with him, but we're going to root for him because the better he does in that offense, our pick, once again, goes from 5 to a 4th rounder.
Well, he's Nick Ferguson, 10-year safety in the National Football League. You can find him at NickFerguson_25 for any questions that you have. He's breaking down tape as well for his Denver Broncos, for any team that you want. And Nick, you said something that really piqued my interest. You talked about the Tennessee Titans putting their face back on. And correct me if I'm wrong, if we're talking about masks, maybe next week for our Halloween edition, I think we've got to figure out some teams and who they're dressing up as for Halloween. What do you think about that?
Yeah, there's some teams masquerading as contenders, or they're nothing but pretenders.
All right, Nick, what do you have to say for the people on the way out?
Hey, knuckle up That's right. It's that time of the year. It is fall, and you definitely want to make sure you knuckle up and make sure that you bundle up. That's the thing for me.
We're those guys. We hope to be your guys. Catch you for a spooky version on Halloween. Peace.